My name's Claire Cable. I'm the Chief Executive and Nurse Director of the Queen's Nursing Institute Scotland. For those of you who don't know us, we are a small charity making a big difference, and we have been since 1889. QNIS supports, develops and inspires Scotland's community nurses and midwives to become catalysts for social change. We help them build on their clinical experience to become an active force for a healthier, kinder, fairer, greener Scotland. We've been running a series of winter wellbeing events, and they were the idea of Queen's nurse Jess Davidson, who suggested that alongside professional support, nurses needed a way to decompress during these challenging winter months. By connecting with generous artists who've wanted to work with us, we're delighted to have hosted a whole series of events, and they have been recorded and are available on our website. As spring arrives, this is the last of our winter wellbeing events, but please keep an eye on our Twitter account at QNI_Scotland for future events. Last month, we hosted Victoria Whitworth for an evening of storytelling. She invited us all to try wild swimming and to connect with nature as a way to heal. For anyone who missed it, the recording's available on our YouTube channel and our website. So on to this evening. We are really grateful to be able to share this evening with Tim Barrow, an Edinburgh-born actor, writer and filmmaker. Tim is the founder of Lyre Productions, who've generously shared with us the feature film Riptide. Described as a Scottish schizophrenia love story, Riptide asks the question, what happens when two people with schizophrenia fall in love? Tim will be in conversation with Professor Christie Watson, award-winning author, children's nurse, patron of the Royal College of Nursing Foundation. Her nursing memoir, The Language of Kindness, is currently being adapted as a UK-wide stage tour, and we're really looking forward to that coming to Edinburgh. Tim and Christie will talk about health, the creative process, and the responsibility that comes with turning suffering into art. We'd invite you to ask questions throughout the evening. Do pop them into the Q&A box. We won't be inviting you to unmute, but there will be an opportunity to share your thanks at the end of the event. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to your host for the evening, Christie Watson.
I'm absolutely delighted to be with you this evening. The QNIS has got such a special place in my heart, and during the research of The Courage to Care, I was lucky enough to spend some time with Claire and with various other members of the team, and it was just the most life-enhancing, wonderful experience. So thank you. And I'm also delighted to spend time chatting to Tim. So I'm going to get straight into it, Tim. I hope that's okay. And talk about this incredible film that you've made, Riptide. And I just wanted you to, perhaps in your own words, describe the film for those people who haven't been lucky enough to see it yet.
Thank you, Christie. I'm absolutely thrilled to be doing this. It matters a great deal. It is a strange time in lockdown, and we've had this kind of shining like a beacon since the start of the year. So it's thrilling to do it. Riptide took a long time to make, and the idea, actually, I didn't realize until I started digging into it, but the idea has been present in my life for an awful long time. So in 2011, we'd made our second feature film, which was The Space Between, and that was an Edinburgh love story. And the idea was that Edinburgh's my hometown, so I wanted to show it in kind of all its beauty and light and how it can bring people together. And I was searching around for another story to dedicate life to making into a feature film, and just the idea of a schizophrenia love story came about. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I'd like to spend time with that, and I'd like to do it. But it wasn't until I started working out, okay, well, I need to go and find out what schizophrenia is. I have no first-hand experience of it. That I realized that there's been lots of moments in my life that's kind of attuned to it. So, for example, I grew up in Roslin, which is a wee village south of here. And in the glen over from us, there was Roslin Lee, which is a psychiatric hospital. So we knew people who went there, and we knew people who worked there. And that had been quite enigmatic as a kid growing up. And at various points in my life, this kind of had been there. Like my mum volunteered for the WI when I was younger, and she worked at Edinburgh-born psychiatric hospital, and she worked in the tuck shop there. And as kids, we went along and were there in the tuck shop working with her, and we met these patients, and we were terrified of them because we've been told, well, you should fear these people. And then we discovered that they're actually incredibly gentle and sort of quite shy and quite interested in us. And there was one lad, particular guy called Marvin, who was fascinated by our hands, and he kept saying to us, "Tiny hands are frozen." And we had no idea what he was talking about, but he was so gentle and so kind, this huge guy. And discovered later that it was inspired by a song from La Boheme, the opera. And so, yeah, as soon as I started actually kind of going about researching this new idea for a film, I discovered, oh God, I've got lots of links to this. So I knew that was the kind of course to chart. And we wanted to make a love story. We wanted to do something positive and hopeful and authentic.
That's so interesting. And one of the things I was going to actually ask you about was the theme of hands running through the whole film. So that's fascinating to me, because there were a couple of things that I picked up that were very interesting to me artistically. One of the themes was hands, which maybe was even subconscious for you, I don't know, from this story from Marvin. But the other was color, and the way that you use color is so interesting. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that.
I think firstly, the hands thing, that might be subliminal, yeah. I mean, but the idea of healing hands is lovely. And the idea of, I think, touch when words are inappropriate or inadequate is glorious. And I'm an actor, so I'm kind of used to being kind of tactile, but and certainly in the research that we did with people with schizophrenia, you can see people who don't like to be touched or are very, very nervous of being touched. So that thing became quite important to show physically. And I'm always a fan of stripping out dialogue if we can. So in terms of color, yeah, that was just something we could just go to town on in terms of film, because you can do so much with the cameras now. But focusing on specific colors, so blue became a really important color for the character of Jacob. But it's also kind of key to the sea and the sky. And red became a really important color for Eva. So it was quite an obvious red dress. But in terms of moments of distress or something, it was really nice shorthands that we could use in film terms, in a language that film audiences understand. That not film, I mean, any audiences can understand red spells danger. So you've got boxing sequences of redness and kind of a lack of clarity, which seems to be some sort of heightened tension.
Yeah, I find it really interesting because some of the people that I've known, both in my personal life and from nursing, who have had a diagnosis of schizophrenia, quite often complain or talk about the fact that they've lost colour. And so the fact that you had so much colour in this film was really, it was almost, you'd flipped it. And I quite like, I like that idea that you'd flip this Technicolor concept. And in terms of the hands, I mean, I'm very interested really, obviously, about the importance of touch and skin hunger that we've had in the past, but skin hunger this year, you know, I'm thinking particularly of, for example, my nan, who is 96 and she hasn't physically touched anyone now for 15 months. And she's really stoic and amazing, incredible about it. But I can't imagine how that is affecting people, and particularly people with long-term or serious mental illness. And I read a really interesting piece of research about clozapine, which also features in your film, one of the medications that says that, you know, people do really well on clozapine. And the researchers always looked at the pharmacology and thought that the pharmacology was absolutely on point. But it hasn't looked at the fact that if you're on clozapine, you need 2 weekly blood tests, which means you have human contact with a nurse, a mental health nurse, every 2 weeks. And so my question would always be, well, is it the contact, is it the human contact that we have that is as healing, if not more healing, than potentially some of the medications that we feel like is more healing? And so when I was watching the film, I was very much aware of your sort of delve into those kind of big questions. And I wondered about questions, and what was your central question, if you had one, for the film overall? Maybe you didn't have one, and that's fine. Maybe you didn't.
I think this is a great question. Did we? Quite possibly. I think so much of it was, is this possible?
Yeah.
Not just about, is it possible for two people to fall in love? Of course it is. Is it possible for people with schizophrenia to fall in love? Of course it is. They fall in love and they have careers and they hold down jobs and have kids and everything that anyone can do. I think we were sort of very aware of bringing it to an audience who might have sort of less understanding of it, and also be served badly by films or pieces of art in the past to kind of perpetuate stigma and myths. And we just wanted to kind of keep pushing things out there and say, this is possible. It's possible, and hopefully this is authentic. It's not like we're striving for documentary-like accuracy, but we are trying to put this out there and saying, yes, it is possible for people to have a love story. And I guess the question is then, for an audience, do you buy that? Do you believe it? And luckily, I think with feedback that we've had people do, and they get quite an awful lot from it.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think there is a difference between truth and fact. And it feels like—
all right, can you say?
Okay, so the president of Nigeria is in charge of the country. Fact. Is it truth? Maybe not. So what I liked is that it felt like you were searching for truth. You were really seeking truth in the film, and like you were saying about authenticity, I suppose one of the things that I find really challenging in writing is research. I really find it my biggest challenge, and I'll end up researching things that never ever go in my books. And I wondered a lot about your process, because obviously, as Claire mentioned, we have a responsibility when telling people's stories. And I wondered about your process, with your research process, essentially, and give me any tips, please.
Oh God, you don't need tips from me. That's interesting though, that in terms of focus on tons of research and some of it goes nowhere near what you write. I think because I sort of strive for doing more research, but I get, like, whether it's filmmaking or playwriting or acting, I kind of want to get straight to it and get to the writing, or get to the rehearsing, or get to the kind of imagining, whether that's physical imagining and improvising, or whether that's got a story, I just need to write some dialogue, I need to write some scenes, I need to get it out there. And maybe it changes from project to project. Some might add a bit more structure, a bit more research too. I think with this, because it's a world that A, I have no first-hand experience of, and B, I've got a head stuffed full of myths, stigmas, stuff which probably isn't true. I needed to really, and then with that becomes a very clear responsibility to tell an authentic tale and to do justice to people that we are saying these people have schizophrenia. because I want people with schizophrenia to come see the film and go, okay, I'd buy it, or whatever. So the research is essential, but sometimes I think in previous things it's got in the way, and this one it only informed, because the actual research was also centered around people. So people's stories, people's experiences, people's jokes, people's kind of beliefs, suppositions, all sorts.
Mm. And did you worry much about your sort of right to write it without first-hand experience? I'm sure, you know, we all grapple with that, because we're always writing outside experience. If you write in history or different gender, or, you know, I'm writing about someone in space or whatever, then it's outside your own experience. But I guess with something that's so political and so politicized, it must have been quite nerve-wracking, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. And every time you make a decision in the edit suite, you're going, what are the ramifications of that? And are we showing a bit too much of someone in distress? Or do we have the right to show people in distress? And I think when we had those big questions kind of ethically of what should we be showing? What do we have the right to show? We would go back to either the research, or quite literally go back to people who had helped us so far and say, what do you think? Can we, should we? So that was pretty cool. I guess there's one thing I want to say. In terms of, because when I first landed on the idea of a schizophrenia love story, I thought, great, you can really do all sorts of things visually because of hallucinations. And then discovered that the majority of hallucinations are auditory. And that gave so much more freedom, because you go, wow, we can really go to town on the soundtrack. And how do we do that? Do we directly replicate what someone with schizophrenia might be hearing? And every time we kind of tried to do that, or went on YouTube and discovered things that were made, people trying to replicate how someone with schizophrenia might encounter the world auditorily, it just didn't feel right for the film. So we tried to scale back and try to do more subtle stuff, and hence the use of color. We tried to, and the fast editing, the number of kind of different ideas, different disruptions to the world, that gave us a great sort of freedom to create with that. But we wouldn't have found that unless we'd done tons of research and then discovered that this was the best way to do it in terms of holding our responsibility as well.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting and very well done and sensitively done. And for me, it was a love story with two people who happen to have schizophrenia, or happen to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. Is schizophrenia even real? I mean, we could go off on a tangent. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because obviously as a novelist and yourself as a writer, I once went to a panel and listened to a psychiatrist friend of mine talk about psychosis. And I was ticking off in my own head the symptoms that I have that are probably necessary for my job. Hallucinations, yes. Do you hear voices? Yes. Do you speak to people aren't there? Yes. Do you have delusions? Do you step in other skins and imagine you're a prophet, or I don't know, someone from the past? Yes. Tick, tick, tick. And so it does feel very interesting to me that my job requires me to have to think in abstraction, to have less of a focus on concrete reality. So the nature of psychosis for me is probably an element of the job of a novelist. And that's probably a very controversial thing to say, but I think it might be. And so I think there are benefits to that as well. And what I wondered about the film, because you did certainly use things like nature and a real understanding of the characters, had such an understanding of the natural world that I felt like it was a benefit, it was a positive. These are not all negative things or negative symptoms. It wasn't focused on the pathology. It was focused on a life that was individual and not generic, and not, you know, it interested me about the nature, and whether the nature for you had become a character, and the sea particularly.
There's loads I want to ask you about what you said. So I'll answer your question first and ask you a question. Yes, definitely. It's sort of, things went hand in hand with the shooting process. So we got so excited about filming tiny bugs and ladybirds and bees and butterflies taking off from flowers and things. And that did sort of go hand in hand with the idea of someone who notices things which other people might not, and someone who maybe starts to see patterns, like everywhere they go they will see bees, possibly. In the summer that's quite common, but it became a really nice motif all the way through. And like, again, as soon as you delve into the world of nature, it's something completely out with our control, and doing it in the city becomes, there's a bit of a sort of discrepancy there. So it just fitted. There was a lot of trial and error of, do we show bees? Yes, we do. Where do we show them? Oh, that looks great there, and that feels right. And so much with editing with this film, and possibly all films if people are really open to it, is that you just try stuff that feels right, whether it's music, whether it's color, whatever. So we experimented with black and white. In terms of going back to a previous question, you're saying that people perhaps lose the color from the world, or do see things in black and white, and we tried stuff and it didn't quite feel right. But there's certain times where we've really drained the color from scenes, or times where we've just really exposed it. So what I wanted to ask you is about, sort of as a novelist, but coming from a background of nursing, it seems possibly you're talking about two slightly different worlds. So you're inhabiting one world now, which is sort of different to a lot of, oh, I don't know, I'm kind of fumbling with words here, but in terms of, because I'm an actor, like I'm used to make believing. I'm used to striving for truth, but you kind of, you make believe and you play and you imagine stuff. And
yeah,
so,
I mean, I think that nursing and writing comes from the same place, and is possibly more closely linked than people think about. And one of the things that's always fascinating to me is that people don't understand that. And so I often get asked by journalists, but you're a nurse, or how did you start writing? And for me, it makes absolute perfect sense, because both things essentially are about story. So we've talked a bit about the nature of suffering, and suffering is about story, and suffering is about sharing stories, or the alleviation of suffering is sharing stories. And so, nurses understand and have always understood that if you listen properly and carefully and piece together someone's life, the jigsaw puzzle of their life, and really get to know their story, then not only can you know what treatment they need, but you can better deliver it in a way that they'll accept it. And so writing is just the same. It's about story, and storytelling is at the heart of both those things, I think, which is, it feels quite a radical idea, but actually it's not really a radical idea. It's always been there. It's just that people haven't really maybe assessed it in that way. And I was going to ask you, just before we move on to some questions from people listening, which is great. And anyone that's got any questions, please ask us. We're very nice. You can ask us anything within reason. But I was going to ask you about writing and directing in the same film. I mean, that's not for the faint-hearted, surely. And acting, obviously.
And acting, I mean, either it's incredibly egotistical, or it's because you're out of options, or it's because you just got to do it. And I knew I had to do it. I directed a film before where I was acting in it, and I've been acting and writing and producing. I think with film, there's tons of help. There's lots of people, whether it's someone pointing a camera at you or it's someone doing your makeup, you can ask them, but it's essential to gain the artistic input from everyone who you're working with. Absolutely essential, because best ideas come from all over the place and not located just to me. So I'm very lucky because I get to go, I've got all these job titles, but if I really analyze, I did the writing, I sat at the keyboard and wrote it all, but where did all those ideas come from? All over the place, all sorts of people, and many bits of research that don't really have anything to do with me. So the directing on set when I'm acting was probably the most difficult bit, but again, I had lots of people around who could say, actually, Tim, that's rubbish. Do it again.
It's a team effort, I guess, which is always helpful. But I'm wondering if you're directing yourself and you're sort of saying to yourself, no, that bit was rubbish. Come on, Tim.
Yeah.
To yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and also because everything's digital, like you get to look back and go, I think we should go again. I'll go again.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask you some of the questions that have come in now. We've got we've got a few questions coming in, and the first one I will ask, if I can get this to work, is by Anonymous. Always a red flag, but it's a lovely question. It says, can I just say that I adored the film?
Oh.
Brilliant. Good opening. And the line is that wee mouse. It's life, then death, some stuff in between. How did you come up with your scripts and dialogue? Thanks, Sandy. So Sandy's not anonymous anymore. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks
Sandy.
so much for the question, Sandy. Thank you. Do you want me to read it again?
I think I got it about the wee mouse. We didn't harm any creatures when making it. Thank God.
How did you come up with your scripts and the dialogue?
A lot of paring back, like just especially jumping from writing plays, which I do a lot of, to writing films. You really got to pare back the dialogue constantly, and then just looking at films that I like and trying to sort of get the most natural feel possible. You just end up stripping out loads of dialogue, and even in the edits, we would go, the pictures are doing all the work. We just need to strip stuff out. I think with that particular scene, I was quite keen. I knew the beats of it. I knew what was happening before, what was happening in that, so we could get to him making her a cup of tea and giving her some digestive biscuits. And I thought that was a really, really nice, important moment, and it can lead to the next moment. And that thing about, just the little mouse, it's really horrible seeing the little one just there in the forest, and you go, that's all it is.
Yeah, fascinating. Another one from Laura. When did you realize that you wanted to get into filmmaking? And that's a really great question.
Cheers, Laura. Really late. So I've been acting and writing since 2001 when I finished drama school, and then 2007 we made our first film, The Inheritance. And even then, making it and doing it, I didn't know that was kind of really what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to tell the story, make this film. It's a Scottish road movie about two brothers who hate each other, so it kind of felt totally right. But I didn't know, and it was only when things started to happen, we got to screen it, and it was only sitting in audiences with other people, with a whole bunch of strangers watching it and hearing feedback, that I went, I love this and I want to do more of it. And it's the best thing, is going and doing events like this. It'd be great if it was all live and we could all see each other, but it is absolutely the best thing when you're with a whole bunch of people you don't know who are watching your work, and whether they love it or hate it, whatever, it's some shared experience, which is just amazing.
Yeah. I agree, and I'm really missing that, being around people generally, but being around audiences at festivals and things like that. Hopefully it won't be too much longer. There's a question that's come in from Mark, and it's, what is your favorite book you've written and why? And I'm assuming that's a question for me, unless you've written books, Tim. I don't know. I mean, you seem to do everything, so maybe. And the answer is my second novel, Where Women Are Kings, which is by no means my best book. Probably my worst book, actually, in terms of commercial success. And the reason it's my best book is that I wrote it during the worst period of my life. Absolute horrendous time I was going through, and it was the most awful year. And I was just about on my knees, and I was under contract to write this second novel. I had a 2-book deal and I had to write it. I had no choice. And so even though I feel like it's perhaps not my best work, the fact that I wrote it, it's published, it got well reviewed, I'm so proud of that book. And sometimes I think that's the thing about success, isn't it? It's sometimes just hanging on and realizing that that's the best you can do at that particular time. So that will always have a special place in my heart, that book. I mean, it's not awful, but it's not, I hope, but it's not my best work. So that's the answer to that question. So Mandy has asked, for Tim, writing, editing, then on the filming, what was the most challenging experience, and what have you learned that you did not know, I'm assuming? Yeah.
Learning all the time, learning every day, learning to trust other people's instincts. What I said before, job titles can be really dangerous and misleading, because with the director I get final say, but it doesn't mean that I know much. It's great when you can see someone in front of you, whether it's an actor, whether it's the editor or sound designer, and the sound design was just an absolute world of wonder, who goes, I've got an idea, let me show you, and you go, yeah, okay, I'll watch, and it tends to be amazing. It's lovely, it's great. And Christie, you must have that in all lines of work, that when you see people getting the idea and going for it.
Yeah, I think it's really incredible, isn't it? And it is, I think, in all areas of writing, directing, art, it becomes a team effort sooner or later if you want to go public with it. And that's when the beautiful things happen, and you bounce ideas off each other and learn from each other, like you said. Okay, Jess has asked, can you describe how you built the characters of Jacob and Eva? And I love the byline, you chuckle in your sleep.
You chuckle in your sleep was said to me. Well, as soon as I met Elspeth Turner, I knew, oh, I want to make a film with you. And also, so we started going out as well, and when I married, and so she had to have me direct her in a film, which couldn't have been easy, but she put up with me. So we drew on tons of stuff, lots of research. One of the key people who helped us was Professor Stephen Laurie, who's head of psychiatry at Edinburgh University. And so we would go to the Royal Edinburgh Hospital quite a lot and talk to him, talk to various people who stayed there or were on the wards there. And he was great with both of us and got to help in both different ways. So, and we would just keep bouncing ideas off each other, myself and Elspeth. And she brought tons of stuff for Eva, and lots of stuff that I hadn't seen. And so she was able to have tons of input into the script, as well as I have to say, Robbie Jones, the cinematographer, he was there from the beginning. Again, that misleading job title. He was there contributing ideas to the script, to various shots. So it was a wonder to be, again, surrounded by these wonderful artists who are all helping kind of lift the film all the time.
Yeah, I thought the cinematography was incredible, actually. Absolutely amazing. It was just beautifully shot, wasn't it? So yeah, you can see the talent there. Okay, a couple more quick questions and then we will have a quick further chat. So the film features a link to Ingmar Bergman. In particular, you mentioned The Seventh Seal and Persona. Are you a big Bergman fan? I noticed you both have a strong, sometimes stark portrayal of mental health, never shying away from the subject matter. So I'll let you respond first and then I'll chip in.
Am I a big Bergman fan? No, in terms of a fan. I have unbelievable respect for his work ethic, his craft, his attention to detail, his craft. Some of his films are absolutely astonishing and mind-blowing, and some are not, and that doesn't matter because he made more films than just about any filmmaker alive or dead. I think I was certainly drawn to certain films where just the style, so something like Persona, where he would cut things quite sort of randomly, haphazardly, bring in stuff, suddenly get rid of stuff. I'm a bit wary of that just for its own sake, because it becomes an effect, and also maybe you go some way to perpetuating stigma about, oh, this is how people with schizophrenia see the world or react or whatever. And so we had to be careful when we were doing that, or really understand what we were saying when we were doing it. But yeah, the stuff started to fit, the idea of Bergman and his fascination for mental health and psychosis, principally his own. He's most fascinated with his own interior world and dreams and such like. And he did, I mean, I don't know enough about him, but I think there's a fair bit of misogyny there. But he gave amazing platforms to female actors which many people didn't at the time, and created incredible roles for them and gave them opportunities that other filmmakers kind of didn't. And the film world, again, is littered with shocking misogyny. So
yeah, no, I just a sort of side question from that. I wondered about if any of the actors in the film were people who suffered with mental illness, that you'd actually sought out actors at all, or if that's something that you'd consider in the future. I'm just thinking particularly It's a Sin recently, you know, and I think Russell T Davies has got such an interesting approach, and it has added something to the art to basically he just went out and said, I'm only going to have gay actors in this series, which was incredibly controversial, but I think really did something quite special. And I wondered about that with when you were casting, whether that was something you considered.
Yes, definitely considered it. I'm trying to work out what to say. I knew the people I wanted to work with. Whether people have diagnosed psychosis or conditions, I don't really want to say.
Of course, yeah.
I shouldn't. So talking about myself and Elspeth, no, and so that can feel quite bold that we took these parts on and we don't have that first-hand experience. I would argue that actors, if they do things responsibly, should have the opportunity to play those roles. Although I absolutely take the point of casting people with first-hand experience of that would lend a difference to the roles.
Yeah, and I think coming back to sort of the question about we don't shy away from you know, sometimes the stark reality of mental illness. I mean, my you know, I think I get quite worried is the right word probably about the portrayal of mental health and mental illness in the media, and certainly this focus on wellness and the fact that, you know, it seems to be that people, when they talk about mental illness, are really talking about mild depression and anxiety, and talking about it in terms of wellness. And my experience of mental illness in friends, families, you know, and people I've looked after is very much the other end of the extreme, where if we're talking about mental illness, we need to talk about personality disorders, we need to talk about schizophrenia, we need to talk about psychosis, we need to talk about people who are very, you know, sometimes difficult to portray in the media, but actually it's the same pot of money that goes to mental illness, whether it's one extreme or the other. And I do worry that, not that we've glamorized mental illness, but certainly that we're focusing all our eyes are on one particular subset of what people think mental illness looks like. And certainly in my experience, in media and otherwise, it hasn't looked like that at all. And I do worry where it's one pot of money. So is some of the money going to the sort of slightly less difficult end, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. So I think that's for me, it was another plus for your film, is that, you know, it was quite dark in places, even though it was very hopeful and it's a love story. I think it was a good thing that you went to some dark places with it. Am I making any sense? I'm sure I'm not.
Yes, absolutely, in terms of what you said in the final part, but also I think you've articulated something that I have been a bit fearful of with this sort of vast societal drive to talk about mental health. Absolutely brilliant. However, is there an understanding of all the different shades of mental health and what happens when we get to those really dark shades that, as you say, need a lot more than kind of adverts on the tube and things?
Yeah, I think so. I think we do need to talk about everything. And if people are, you know, if people are suffering from a very serious lifelong mental illness, it looks quite different from what I see an image in the media. It really does. And certainly a turmeric latte and a walk around the park is just not going to happen. So I think we do need to talk about this. And it's a reality. It's a sad reality for many, many people. To finish up, because I'm very aware, I'm really bad at keeping to time, so I'm getting some alerts, which is excellent. So I'm going to ask a final question. I think it's for both of us, and it's from Mark. And we've got about 3 minutes left, and he's asked us what we're working on next. So I don't know if you want to tell us what your next plan is, and then I'll tell you mine.
Okay, very briefly then, because we haven't got long. Right. Okay, so Riptide needs great drive, especially because cinemas are not open yet, and we're going to put it in cinemas, and we're going to tour it, and we're going to just screen as much as possible. So we've done tons of online festival screenings, which is a joy, but I want to go and see audiences. So we're going to do that in the next year and a half, 2 years. What else am I working on? I'm working on two things I'm very excited about. One is an Edinburgh show at Tynecastle Park Football Stadium, and it's a show about a group of women in the First World War in a factory who started a football team. And as loads of football teams happened all across the UK during the First World War, and it's about them and their lives and loves and tragedy. And then what happens in 1921, the football authorities ban the women's game. So 100 years ago, men banned the women's game. So we're telling a show about that. We're going to do it at the Edinburgh Fringe this year. The other thing I'm really excited about working on, I'm an associate producer on a short film, which is a precursor of a feature film, and it's about 18th century highway women in the UK. So it's a Western style, it's that sort of scope, and it's about these women, and again, their lives and loves and highway robbing.
Oh, well, I'll be watching that, definitely. Sounds amazing, because when you think about Westerns, it's such a man's film world, isn't it? So yeah, definitely, we need the other perspective. I am working on a book about women to keep with your theme, and I'm working on a book of 2 books really, but a book of essays about being a woman in your 40s and the perimenopause and what love means now. So it's really the theme of love, but also the messy magic of being a woman in your 40s and getting it very wrong. So it's a lot of joy and fun to write. And then I'm also working on another book of essays called Conversations in Our Living Room with my 16-year-old daughter, who will be 18 by the time it publishes. And that's, we're going in, we're doing a deep delve into race, climate change, gender, sexuality, you name it, everything we speak about in our living room and our different perspectives, and really trying to talk to that generational divide. So keeping busy during this time. But our time, I think, has come to an end. I'm getting all sorts of messages. So I just wanted to wrap up and also ask everyone to unmute in a minute. But for now, I just want to say thank you so much, Tim, for such a fascinating chat, but also for your wonderful, wonderful film. And I know you've got it up on the website for a month, I believe, so people can go off and watch it and spread the word. So thank you so much for making that beautiful piece of art about a difficult subject matter, but really, really important. And if everyone can just unmute, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Christie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks all.